catch more fish.
Hey guys, Mike here from Binya Outdoors. I have a special guest in the house. I'm actually going to let him introduce himself because he has so many roles and so many titles. I think it's going to be better coming from him.
Yeah, Baily Eigbrett here. Like you mentioned, I wear a few different hats. I run the Serious Angler podcast over at the Serious Angler Podcast Network. I work full time in the industry with gunpowder, and then also do my own personal gig over at with Be the Fish. So it's keeps me busy.
Absolutely. And if you're looking for any of those, show description. I saved you the trouble. There's links to all his stuff. So that's actually how I discovered Baily was through the Serious Angler Network. Now it was just the Serious Angler podcast when I started
Yeah.
watching it. But I needed something. So there's a lot of podcasts out there for fishing, and I'm friends with like Bobby Roastbeef from Jigs and Bigs, for example. And there's some and Bass and Brews. There's some like less serious ones. And then there's your podcast where you guys are typically interviewing pros or guys in the industry, and it's I would say a little bit more structured and tends to be a lot more like subject oriented and detailed. Unlike my stream, which is just this whole thing was pretty much invented because I got sick of not having ice to ice fish on and not having open water to fish on. So I just said, you know what, I'm just gonna start asking random people on Instagram if they'll come talk to me on the internet, and here I am. So worked out.
Heck yeah.
One of the other reasons I wanted to bring Baily on is if you guys don't follow his channel, don't know about Be the Fish, he's big into the kayak tournament world. And I am just getting into the tournament world. So I had a bunch of questions that I wanted to ask him, and rather than blow him up on Instagram, I figured we would come on here for an hour and talk instead. The first question I had for you is, and I know you do get to, because of the way your job is, you do kind of get to travel and pre-fish a little bit, but do you have, like, before you get to a body of water, other than like I know like the standard Google Earth, do you have any other techniques that you use to like get information about a body of water before you get there?
Yeah, I think one of the bigger things that I use beyond just using your general mapping, um, I think one little tidbit that folks don't think about all that often is I compare different mapping apps in regards to Google Earth, but also Google Maps, Apple Maps, because they'll show you all different times that they've
Oh, okay.
times a year type of deal. So I do that. It's not like a big thing, but whereas the Google Earth history is more of the kind of the sneakier deal that Ed O'Never's kind of let loose a couple of years
Yeah.
back.
Yep.
I think a bunch of people are like, damn, when he came out with that. But beyond that, man, I compare a couple different mapping apps, but the one I really trust the most and predominantly is the Humminbird One Boat Network app. It's brand
Okay.
new. It used to be Fish Smart for folks that have used Fish Smart before. It's brand new and it has the new VX mapping technology in it. And with that, you have uh, like depth shading. You have 5 different, color palettes that you can apply to different depth zones. So me being an offshore guy, that's the biggest thing for me is I kind of apply what small knowledge of fishing I have to what might be going on
Right.
that body of water and apply the different color palettes. And that can at least just give me an idea of how the lake sets up. And then kind of gives me an idea of what I'm like, almost areas that I want to go graph before I even get to the lake and fire up the Helix units. It just kind of, that's really the thing I use the most, quite
Okay.
honestly. And even if I'm fishing shallow, it's a great way to find spawning flats. I mean, Santee Cooper, I screwed that up royally in regard to the tournament, but I at least found them, and you could almost kind of call your shot to where they're going to be. With using that mapping app, because I could pick out where the flats were going to be. The thicker the red lines, like for your 1 foot, 2 foot shallow palette, like you can see where the flats are going to be, and almost guaranteed if there's dollar pads in that flat, you can see on Google Maps. Yeah, they're going to be spawning in there.
And I'm guessing with that app, because it's a Humminbird, I'm assuming it integrates with the finders. Are you able to like mark waypoints and then transfer them, or is it just separate from that?
So that's the one unfortunate thing about the app.
Doesn't do that
It
yet.
doesn't transfer the waypoints over, but what it does is at least gives me things to look at, because usually when I'm looking at that, I can if it's high percentage stuff that I want to go graph, I usually don't ever mark waypoints on my app itself, but
Yep.
I will set reminders of like, hey, this is a place I really want to go check out. Like, especially if it's a pre-spawn tournament or right, so like if it's say if it's a TVA type of deal, right in the post-spawn, there's a good looking ledge I want to go, scope out, graph. It's kind of more like my reminders. Hey, I want to graph this, and then I go through it and I put it on
Yep.
so I can go, check that out, put it on my
Yeah,
sir.
I do the same thing with I mean Google Earth is kind of what I do it with. I'm gonna check that app out though because for me, see, I want to learn to be more offshore. I'm like your classic Alex Rudd. I'm gonna find a tree and throw a Texas rig at it kind of guy. I'm beat the bank guy, but I will fish offshore obviously if the fish aren't there. Um, but it's something that I'm trying to learn, and that's actually a lot of times I watch a lot of your videos because of that because you do talk about what bait you're using and why you're doing it, and it's for me live tournaments. I've done a ton of like the KBF challenge series and crap like that where it's all
Mm-hmm.
online national stuff. But see, Vermont doesn't have a kayak trail at all. It's all either
Oh,
big
really?
boat or nothing. Yeah, there is not a single. The only thing that we've ever had was that like BASS one that they had on Champlain. That's the closest we've
Yeah.
had to an actual kayak event here. A lot of people will come to Champlain for events, but we don't have an actual trail here that's like a weekly, monthly trail or whatever. So I have to go out of state, which is why I'm traveling to Massachusetts and fishing the MAKB.
Hmm.
Um, and some of the guys that fish in that it sucks for me in a way because I'm fishing against like Ken Wood and Joe DeDeo and Nate Shagnon, and I'm sure you've heard some of those names from
Yeah.
Hobie stuff. Like those guys are in this trail, so I'm going to be fishing against those guys, and
Hey,
I'm fishing their waters and I'm going unseen. So I'm trying to do as much homework as I can before I get there because
only way to get better, man, is fish against the sticks.
yeah. And that's kind of what I mean. I'm not. It's funny because it's from a content side. Like you kind of inspired me like to do that trail rather than just take an easier trail because I've learned that like I could make content about my journey of getting there. Like it's more vloggy style. Like I can document how do I get here, how do I grow, and hopefully my audience will follow me as I either suck or win. And ultimately, it's like it's a cool way to like tell a story rather than like in my mind it's like I want to win. Obviously, I'm not going there to lose. That's not who I am as a competitor. But at the same time, it's something where I can at least come out of it with content. So I'm okay with that. So
Yeah, I mean, Brandon Polinick said it best in that there is no lose, it's win or learn.
right.
If
Yep.
you think you're losing, it's all in the mindset. If you think you're losing, you need to be learning.
Right. That Facebook user chat, I don't know if you see this right here. That's Frankie from Slay Nation.
Oh, what up?
It's like I had to actually log into the Facebook page that he's on, but yeah, it's a few different people that have jumped in here. But the other thing I was trying to think of is do you have I asked Alex the same question. Do you have like a standard loadout that you just take to every body of water, or do you literally prep all your baits and tackle per body of water?
Yeah, my process is hectic, and we're actually moving out of our current location, our apartment here, and moving
Totally.
into a new place. It's going to make my process much, much, much easier on me. But I am completely load out specifically for that body of water, load back, and like completely take and pickpocket a bunch of things, and like it's
Yep.
a complete regroup, which creates a lot of work. But uh, if I tried to bring everything I own, it would be impossible.
Right.
Just don't have that much space, like in the truck, in the kayak type of deal to do that. And it's just honestly not that smart to. But yeah, for the most part, man, like I really tailor a lot of what I'm doing to the body of water that I'm fishing. And I go way overboard all the time in
Yep.
regards to even if it's our local tournament we got this Saturday type of deal. I'm sitting there rigging last night because my day, today and tomorrow is going to be so hectic.
Yep.
I'm not gonna have too much time to rig rods. I'm sitting there on the 17th rod and rigging up, but I'm like, man, I'm not gonna need all this, but here I am,
Yep.
and I know for a fact I'm gonna bring way too much stuff. So it's better to be prepared. Like the saying goes, better to have it, not need it, than not have it and need it. So
Yeah, that makes sense. See,
yeah.
for me, it's kind of funny because I kind of do a little bit of both. I have like a set of confidence baits, I guess,
Mhm.
that pretty much like I love lipless. I don't use deep divers at all. Like I hate I for some and I think a lot of that comes with a lot of the bodies of water I fish locally all have milfoil and like pretty like you're talking in 10 feet of water at 6 feet of milfoil. So like I don't bother with the big deep divers because a lot of
Mhm.
times I get them hung in that milfoil and they stay there and then I spent $12 on a bait that just stays in the bottom every time. So I
Yeah.
use lipless because I can rip them back out, and a lot of times they'll come out better than the divers. But for me, it's like I do tailor some stuff, but I kind of have like individual boxes for like I'll have like a square bow lipless box that I kind of use, and then I tailor the colors and sizes for it. The reason why I asked that question is because I've been like I said, I'm kind of racking my brain on what I need to do, and I'm traveling not you know Santee Cooper or like some of these trips that you are doing down at places, but I'm going like 3 hours, so I leave a lot of my baits in my truck, and then I just kind of like think about what I need when I get to the ramp in case there's water clarity or something that I wasn't expecting. I can grab it, but it's it's I'm trying to figure out that system, so I'm asking everybody that does tournaments because there's nobody up here that does them, so I can't ask like the guys up here do big boat tournaments, and if you ask them what they bring, they say all of it because it fits in my boat, so they don't bother to they don't have a limited
Right.
space like we do.
Yeah, yeah, it's very tailored to the time of year, the week, anything. I always try to. I have it separated into what I think is going to happen, and I have this giant, especially from a plastics bin.
Yep.
I have a whole big plastic bin. It's like a 50-gallon. I don't even know the size of the damn thing. It's
Yep.
basically a big storage bin. That's all plastics, and it's separated by. I have different bags that I use, like the nice like 6 cents zip bags type of
Yep.
deal, like the dividers. And I'll have baits I know that I'm gonna have with me. I have baits that are like if it's this water clarity, that water clarity, and kind of just like thinking ahead, like if it's gonna be windy that week, if it might get muddy, I want to have a couple backup different chartreuse colors or black and blues type of deal. But even when it comes to like my tackle boxes, hard baits, things of that nature, I have here's what I think is going to happen. Then I have backup, and then I have here might be a sneaky deal, and it's its
Yep.
own little box of
Yep.
stuff that might be just like, hey, I want to give this a shot in practice. So it's kind of divided up into three different tiers, but again, just bringing way too much stuff.
Yeah, I have the same tendency. The problem I have too is I'm learning quickly, and it's I treat like I've started treating fun fishing like tournament fishing to kind of keep myself in that mentality. Like when I fish for fun, I'm still trying to like get a limit and still trying to think of that same mentality. But what I'm noticing is that no matter what preparation I do when I get on the water, what I thought was going to work isn't going to work. Like it always seems like every single time I may have one right guess on a bait and everything else has to be changed out. So
Hey, if
it's
you got
crazy.
confidence, rock with the confidence. I mean, man, I always got a drop shot like with a robo worm
Yep,
where everywhere I go. Had it Harris Shane, had it at Santee Cooper. I didn't throw it, but like
it was
you
there.
gotta have it.
Yeah, that's a thing that so drop shot's something that it's funny as it is, the only time I've ever really been super successful with a drop shot was drop shotting a gilly rather than a drop
Hmm.
shot bait.
Yeah, man, dude, my
It's a weird
mainstay.
shot.
As soon as the spawn is over, I every single time I fish, I have a 6-inch robo worm in morning dawn
Yep.
tied up on a spinning rod. It is my ultimate confidence, whether it's small fish, big fish, quantity, whatever. Like it will
Yep.
catch them until the fall comes. So
Yeah, I'm trying to work on, and that's the thing is I think a lot of it comes to also I'm expanding more waters that I fish, but I got complacent for a while, and the places that I was fishing were heavy grass lakes. So the drop shot, I would have to have like a 3 foot leader to have it be above the grass kind of deal. because it drops in, but then it just gets hung every time, and then I'm fighting to get it back out.
Well,
And
you said you're fishing milfoil, right?
there's a lot of, yes, mostly milfoil, but then there's other grass mixed in with it. It's pretty thick mats basically on the bottom, but
Yeah, if it's not matted, I mean, don't be afraid to throw it in there too, because the idea is like I love throwing a drop shot around scattered milfoil.
yep,
I'm typically gonna throw a chatterbait or swim jig around it or
right,
swim a worm or flip it first, but
right,
there is a really good bite that happens with a drop shot around milfoil, and the idea is getting your weight hung in that grass, and that is actually how you trigger those bites. Because
okay,
you got to think about it, it's the same sense as like ripping a trap through that stuff. Where
okay,
that bait, when if you think about it too, that bait, if you get in a high percentage area where it's going to get hung on milfoil, you got to think if that grass is there, it's already high percentage. That weight gets stuck in the grass, you can just knock your slack, and that bait is just going to stay
oh,
there.
it's gonna,
That weight's
yeah,
not
it's
going to
gonna
move.
move,
You just give it a hard pop, it comes out, and that could be the same thing as like ripping a lipless or a chatterbait off the bottom, trigger a
that's a good
reaction
point.
strike, especially if they're being finicky. So don't be afraid to throw that around some grass. Obviously, though, if it's matted, I mean, unless
Yeah,
you're like power shot and you're punching through there, I mean, there's not really much you're gonna do.
yeah, there's a few places that, and that's like I said, what happened, that's actually why I started doing tournaments, because I realized like I was catching a lot of fish, big fish on this one body of water that's like 20 minutes from my house. And then I was catching fish in another body of water. But then like I went to do like I started doing a national, like I think it was a KBF, and I needed a bigger bite, and the fish I was catching with the fish I was catching. Eventually you get to a point where the fish are slotted in a size, and when you need a bigger size, they're just not there. I needed to go to a different body of water. And then when I got to these other bodies of water, I'm like, oh, the four techniques that I'm using on these other bodies of water don't work here because it's an entirely different kind of body of water. So
Mhm.
I'm trying to like, I never want to stop learning, but I'm trying to like specialize in what I'm good at and then expand and be like semi good at like drop shotting and other things. Like I literally caught my first fish on a Ned rig Saturday.
Damn.
I've never like I just never used it because again, a lot of the places that I'm fishing have so much grass and like lily pads and stuff like that that a Texas rig or a wacky rig is more viable in that situation. But
Yeah.
I was in Massachusetts actually fishing with Bobby from Jigs and Bigs, and I was trying to like, we were fun fishing, so I was like, screw it, I'm just gonna throw this Ned rig on. And I was actually basically using I bought a well, you're a do it guy, so I bought the Newt mold, the 3-inch Newt mold.
Mhm.
It was basically a brush hog with a ribbon tail.
Yeah.
So I used that instead of like the regular traditional Ned bait style because it had that little bit of a curly tail flap to it, and that's what I was hitting on. So it was kind of cool because not only was it a Ned fish, but also on a bait that I made, so it was kind of a
Yeah.
win-win on both sides. But
Yeah, it's a nice feeling when it's like on something you created. So it's pretty sweet.
it,
But dude, it's a good point though you made of like always wanting to learn, but also not trying to like race over some stuff. And I feel like that's a
right,
really challenging thing for people pending your stage of the learning curve is like there's something to trying to learn as much as you can, but there's also a stance of like making sure you're taking the time to focus on certain avenues of that learning curve and
yeah,
not like rushing it because if you rush it, you have 30 different things you just learned, but you're not proficient in any of them.
yep.
So it's an interesting thing trying to toggle through that. So it seems like it almost comes in waves, especially when it in regard to like bait and technique.
I that's the thing I've learned doing content has helped me be better at fishing, and it's because I'm trying to do more teaching this year. Like I made a promise to like educate. And what was funny about it is there's two different kinds of channels. So there's fully established channels like Tactical Bassin, for example. There's channels that when those guys talk, they do a good job of explaining things. But if you really think about like Tactical Bassin, they're talking to like me and you. They're not talking to somebody who just picked up an ugly stick for the first time and is not really doesn't even know what a Senko is.
Mhm.
So I'm trying to do that lower level education of like this is how you start fishing with a bobber and a worm. This is how you tie a polymer knot and like work your way up. And what I've realized is as I'm trying to teach all these things, I'm like, I don't really know how to properly drop shot. I don't know how to properly fish a Ned rig because I don't do it that much. And when I do it, I'm probably doing it wrong. So I'm trying to like teach myself these techniques before I bother to relay the information to someone else. And the other thing that's funny about a lot of techniques that I've noticed is that like I said I'm doing it wrong, but there actually isn't really a wrong or right in some cases. Like
Mhm.
there's definitely weird ways to do different baits and there's a traditional way of fishing a bait, but like a lot of guys will drop shot. Like a lot of times when I am drop shotting, I'm not drop straight down. I'm casting it and then drifting to it.
Right.
But a lot of it, because I don't have I the only electronics I have is a Lowrance hook. So it's like just down imaging. I don't even have side imaging. So I
Right.
can't it's hard for me to really, I mean, I'm marking fish better than I was with my Garmin Striker 4 because 2D is not exactly ideal for doing offshore stuff, but
Right.
it's the hook reveal is kind of like a cheat code that I got because I don't know if you know how they do their fish finders, but they have 2D and down imaging, like it's like overlaid on the same
Yeah.
screen.
Yep.
So it helps me find like bait schools and stuff better because you see the different colors easier,
Mhm.
but it's not quite, hummingbird level down imaging
Ah,
and all
man.
that. But
Man, you need that stage though. Like, there's two. We were talking about this last night on our live show of that. There's so many people that will, especially nowadays, because the learning curve is so accelerated with technology and how much technology in regards of the learning curve is accelerated with like YouTube and social
yep,
media. And you could also
right,
argue that the amounts of misinformation has been accelerated, but the amount
right,
of people that see all the different tech out there that they can afford and they just go and buy it without understanding how it works. I feel like there's almost like a pyramid of a gradual technology inclusion to your fishing game that's like you need to learn how to use 2D, read 2D and mapping before you upgrade to side imaging. You need to understand how
right.
side imaging reads and how to utilize it efficiently before you upgrade to maybe whether it's 360 or live. There's
Yep.
people that like, dude, I had a buddy that started fishing a couple years ago and he just got he was like, oh, I think I'm gonna get live scope now. And it's like, well, maybe slow down. You haven't even had a graph before. Maybe
Oh man,
work your way
going from
into
no
it.
graph to live scope,
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
jump.
Yep.
That's the thing is side imaging intimidates me. My dad is a big trout salmon guy. So we did like the trolling, Lake Ontario king salmon fishing thing out of Oswego, that kind
Mhm.
of stuff,
Oh, yeah.
and so I grew up with he has, a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure the Garmin he has is the same one. It's Panoptics or whatever. Live is a Garmin Live Scope. I forget which one's which. Um, it has that capability. He just doesn't have the transducer for it, basically. But he's got side imaging and stuff like that, and we never really knew how to read it. Honestly, we thought we knew what we were talking about, but when you look at side imaging, it isn't what you think it is. When you look at the way it's oriented is not the way it actually is showing you fish and bottom.
Mhm.
Like it's differently, and people think they're marking like fish on side imaging, and it's really more about structure than anything. But
Yeah, I mean, certain distances you can for sure, identify fish, especially if they're in schools. I mean,
yeah,
that's a lot of times that's like if I'm not bringing 360 or anything out, like I call it a poor man's 360 because like if I
right,
have it on 80 or below, I can see fish on my side imaging, and there's
yeah,
ways where I can see them come in, and I've done it before where I look down at my side imaging and I see there's a shadow on this rock pile or whatever, a flat I'm fishing, and I've
yeah,
pitched over and I've caught it. It's you can do it, but then there's people that graph at like 140 as their range, and they think they're seeing fish when there's no shot. You're
yeah,
seeing a fish
exactly.
when that it's that wide, but like 80 and eight, like 60 to 80 is a really good range if you're looking predominantly for fish.
Now,
Um,
is that because of the clarity? Like, is it just getting a better return? Is that how that works? Or I know
eh,
you know more about the science of it than I do, so that's why I asked.
So it's because when your range is drawn out. So if you're going to 140 feet, right? That screen is trying to put so much more information into the size of
Okay.
your screen that it's essentially shrinking the detail that you're seeing because it's trying
Gotcha.
to expand such a larger window. So it's when you have a smaller, 80 to 60. I don't use 60 a lot unless I'm in like 4 or 5 foot of water.
Right.
If I'm using mega, but 80 even I can see schools of smallmouth or schools largemouth. I can see fish on rock piles, or I can even see fish on grass lines, that sort of thing. Um, and it's because it's from that ratio of the size of screen you have with also how far out your transducer is shooting, and
Okay.
also the farther away it is, the harder it is for that transducer to be as detailed as you can, if that makes any sense.
No, it does. So I've like I said, I'm a tech guy, so I do tech support, so I kind of understand a lot about technology, and that does make sense because realistically, your fish finder's resolution isn't changing. So the more detail, the less it's trying to push into one smaller. It does make sense, and that's why, in case you ever wondered, everybody that's watching, why they make a 9 and a 12-inch screen is because the more detail they can fit into that 12-inch screen when the data comes in, whereas a
Mm.
5-inch screen, the resolution's basically the same. It's just bigger, so you can see more detail and really hone in on stuff. When you're the other question I had is like when you're doing, because another reason why I wanted to have you on is because you're one of the few guys that I follow on YouTube, and honestly, I can't think of many more that fish the Northeast and like the East, like actually has to experience the winter. Um, this year, I don't know if you've had this problem yet with your fishing, but we had like the way the thaw happened, we went from locked up in ice to 58-degree water in like a week and a half.
Dude, I found spawners already this past weekend.
And it's is do you think that, so I guess my question is like for me for like this tournament this weekend, when I was fishing in Massachusetts Saturday, we had 68-degree water already in this little pond. Granted, it's like a 100-acre pond, but the place I'm fishing is like a 300-acre pond. Do you think it's like pre-spawn tactics right now? Or do you think water temperature is actually going to even play because it went so fast from cold to temperature, or do you think they're going to be a little bit late?
So I think the reason we're so far ahead, because I was looking back at my notebook from last year, notes wise, and like our lakes here in the Finger Lakes, they're almost a month ahead of time than they were last year. And I think what that is when we had a really, really bad ice season. In regards to, we had a fairly warm winter. We'd have super cold temps, but then we had like 4 or 5 days where it was in the mid 40s and
Right,
didn't allow that ice to really, get solid and
right,
build a good foundation. Um, so what I think it was that, but also we went right from ice to mid 40s basically consistently. And what
right,
it is, it allowed that water temp to get out of that zone where it was like the 34 to 38, which if a lake has some decent depth to it, it's a really hard water temperature to get out of. But once you can get up in the
right.
40s, it almost seems to start accelerating. I don't know if that science behind that's even true. It's just something I seem to have noticed.
No, I noticed that. Like I fish a lot more smaller, 500 and under acre ponds,
Mhm.
and it's the same thing. Like you said, it's like you'll fish it on one weekend, you'll fish it, it'll be 40, and then you'll come back the next weekend, it'll be 65, and you're like, how did this go 25 degrees in a week? But
Yeah.
like Champlain's probably mid 50s at best right now because it's so vast and deep. And
Yeah.
honestly, I think a lot of it has to do with tributaries too. Like if there's a lot of cold water, like up here, everything's melting from the mountains and coming down, so you're getting a lot of cold water mixing back in with.
Yeah. Well, and I think Champ too. I mean, the gut's
Yeah,
probably, I would still be willing to bet the gut is like still like 38, 39
yeah,
degrees. Like and so I think what that is when you have such a drastic change, especially a warming trend that we had, like personally speaking here in Western New York, we went from 40s to 85 all
yep,
weekend long.
yep,
My truck read 91 driving home on Sunday, or not Sunday, Saturday, excuse me.
yep.
And it was like When you have that drastic of a change, it does a couple things. I think on a small body of water, it just sets them on fire because there's not a lot of places for them to go. So they feel that. They feel the heat, especially if they're a long winter. That's what those fish need. If you
Yep.
hit the first couple warming trends in the spring, um, that's when it really starts to get good. But there also is something I've noticed that when it goes that warm that fast, that those fish will rocket up shallow and they will be the hardest fish for you to catch
Yep.
because it's such a drastic of a change that they're almost kind of in shock. So
Okay.
you'll find fish like, dude, I found fish last week that were up shallow, um, or they'd be in 20 foot of water, but they'd be with their backs literally sitting on the surface, just taking in the heat and they wouldn't touch
Yep.
anything. They were spooky. Go back the next day, give them a whole day to like react, settle, adjust, and it is lights out. It is like nothing has changed beyond that.
Right.
Sometimes some fisheries and the way those fish are sitting up, they need a period of time to adjust. Like same thing that happens in the summer to fall transition that I've noticed anyway is that when we get that first cold front, it sucks and it is
Yep.
miserable. But when you
Yep.
have that second cold front, it's lights out. It's so much fun. So I almost think it's kind of the same deal in the spring. But if we get a more gradual incline in temps, I think it's much better. But like it's going to be interesting to see what happens to our spawn this year, at least personally speaking, from the Finger Lakes and the fact that it got so hot so fast, and now we have cold wind and rain all week.
Yep.
It's going to be interesting to see if it pushes fish back or if it elongates the period of time in between waves of the spawn. I don't know. It's going to be really interesting to try to like take note of what's going on and detail that because I haven't seen it like this, and I don't think I've ever seen it like this
Yeah,
warm this
it's
fast.
and that's what confused me because like I said, I was literally fishing. It was like the second week of March and it was snowing and I was on Champlain and the water temps were like 38. And then the following weekend, I hit a small pond that was mid 40s, which is not that interesting except for 4 days later, I took a day off from work and it was 65. And I was like, how the hell? So, like, in my mind, I'm trying to figure out, like, because I'm trying to pick, like I was saying before, I was trying to, like, prep baits and I'm trying to figure out if I'm prepping for the feed bag mode or am I prepping for they're still coming out of the wintering mentality at this point, trying to figure out exactly if I'm downsizing bite to get finicky bass, and unfortunately also on top of it, according to the forecast, which I can't really forecast, I can't use it that far ahead because it's Saturday, but still, it's like there's supposedly a front coming in on Sunday, so it's going to even screw them up even more because the pressure is going to be coming up or down. I'm not really sure when it's going to hit exactly. That's why I'm racking my brain trying to figure out, what to even target. The good news is where I'm fishing, the max depth is 20 feet.
Mm.
So it's not going to be, it's kind of like any of our bodies of water up here. It's literally bowl shaped, edges are shallow, middle's deep, and there's a lot of like the 4 or 5 areas that I circled on my map so far go everywhere from 12 to 4 feet.
Hmm.
So I usually try to straddle in the middle of those so I can fish both sides and then try to figure out where they are or what depth they're at, and then I can target more of that depth so I can. It's kind of a trick I learned is like basically sit right in the middle of the massive change of depths. That way I can figure out where they are, where they're setting up, and then try to find the pattern from there. But
Yeah, that's always a double-edged sword. It's a weird thing to teeter in regards to like if you have a deep fishery and you find like say you got pre-spawn fish, and it's like the temps starting to heat up, you find them when it's warm. You found like some deep fish, say that they're in like 15, 20 foot of water, even deeper maybe if there's like a
yeah,
smallmouth fishery, for example. When you get a cold front after a warming trend, all those shallow fish, it's gonna be hard to catch them.
right,
Like if you got a shallow fishery, that's not a good thing. But the nice part is like when you have, say, a tournament, and then it's like the day of the tournament, you get that cold front that comes in. Those deep fish aren't going to be as affected, which is the nice part.
right.
But you got that shallow water fishery, man. Good luck.
Yeah, and that's the problem is like I don't have. It's not like I can go find the deeper water because from what I can tell, it's like the middle. like the whole middle is the deep part. It's a bowl kind of fishery, so it's you basically have the whole middle of the reservoir to fish to find the deep water. It's not like there's
Hmm.
pockets that I could there it is stream fed at the top from what I can tell. So I may try to start there because at least that's dumping in bait and more oxygenated water and maybe they're gonna hang out up there. I just
Right.
the problem is I'm still trying to figure all this stuff out and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring on an expert because I've seen
No,
some of the
I
tournaments
wouldn't
you
say
do, but
expert. I might lead you in the wrong
well,
direction.
it's funny because you would say that, but like that's the thing that I try to do is I try to take like I kind of like do surveys and I've done them. I mean, I've sent you messages before like, hey, I'm taking a survey because a lot of times I'll ask like 5 or 6 different guys and then a lot of times I'll be like, okay, what's the commonalities? What are people saying that they would do? And then at the end of the day, that's the one thing for anybody who hasn't done a tournament, especially a kayak tournament, there is no game plan. Like you go in there with an idea, but then you pretty much have to adapt as you go. It's constantly adapting. It is not there is no you're not going to stand at the rep and go, "Oh, I'm going to catch all my fish on a chatterbait," and that's going to come true. It's not you 99% of the time it's going to be you may find them with that bait, you may catch a few with this, but then you're going to figure out what they want once they get out there. And that's
Hmm.
one of the reasons why I asked that loadout question because I'm trying to find like that perfect blend of what I need to be able to, pivot if I need to. So
Yeah, for sure.
it's so on kayak questions, the Hobie that you have now, the one thing that I've gotten some feedback from people that have like a traditional pedal kayak versus the Hobie. Do you find like on a long distance pedal with the Hobie? I know you got the motor a lot of times too, but do you feel like the Hobie is like harder on your body than the like a traditional pedal type of kayak? Or I know some guys have said like they have issues with like their hips from the way you have to kind of
Are you getting
do
that
that
from
back and forth.
Rudd?
No, I've had a couple other people up here that have said the same thing.
Yeah,
But Rudd,
Rudd's a good buddy of mine. He went through that, and that's why he switched to Jackson. But no, I've never had any issues with it. Um, for me, I've always liked the Hobie style, and I came from a wilderness radar before I
okay,
went to a pro angler. So I've used both. I don't mind the bicycle style either. It doesn't bother me. I think in regard to how the 360 drive operates, I really like the push and pull method that Hobie has. Just because I think that's a little bit more efficient, if that makes any sense in
yep,
regards to, especially like I love the fact about it is with the kick up fins that I can flutter in inches of water. All you got to do is like a
true,
pulse with your feet, and you're able to maneuver through that. Whereas like if you got,
gotcha.
like
Got to pull a
how
drive, yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, I actually built. I have an Old Town top water. To be honest, if I could go back and do it again, so I ended up with the Old Town top water because West Marine screwed up. So when I was looking for a kayak, I was actually watching Alex's review when he got the autopilot,
Hmm.
and he was talking about like the weight capacity of it. And I realized that the kayak I was in was a Sun Dolphin, and as you can tell, I'm a bigger boy. And I realized that I was personally 100 pounds over the weight of the kayak without my gear, and I
Mm.
was fishing Champlain with this thing, so it was like
Oh boy.
really stupid. So I ended up going online and looking kayaks up, and West Marine screwed up, and they listed the Old Town top waters at like $900. So I ended up buying two. My dad bought one, and I bought one.
Yeah.
But the thing with that kayak that the only thing I don't like is the size of it, but the pedal drive, like you said, the with those especially, the pedal drive is quite a bit below the kayak. So I actually have a cutting board that we cut a mold around the hole that the drive goes in so I can slove that in and then I can get up in the slop and fish with my
Mm.
paddles because otherwise like you said, the problem that's the only problem with the way the Old Town is you have this huge gaping hole in the bottom of your kayak when you lift that drive up.
Yeah.
I've literally had frogs like before I put that block in, I literally had frogs and like crap jump through the freaking hole into my kayak and it's just not fun.
Yeah. I always it was not on purpose, but I noticed this one time when I was uh fishing for spawners like deeper smallmouth. Back when I had an older, it was my wilderness because it had a bigger hole too. If you took the pedal drive out, I'd have an anchor for deeper smallmouth, and what I would do is kind of like my smaller like flogger, if you will, because
Yep.
it wasn't affected by wind. So I could take my drive out, put my anchor down, and I could look down, see
Oh,
clear in the fish, and I could have my rod on the outside fishing that deeper spawner.
dude, that's dirty. I never would have thought of that.
It's like a little redneck flogger, basically, if you will. It's not efficient at all because you like if wind sways you,
Oh,
you're like drifting over it, and you're kind of like looking. But
yeah.
it's a sneaky little way to see them.
That is funny. I never thought of that. That is actually
Yeah,
kind of comical.
yeah.
Because you couldn't really do it with a kayak, especially a kayak like that. Because if you try to lean over the side with that thing, try to use it the proper way, you're gonna probably tip over in a windstorm because you're putting all your weight trying to look through that thing, and then like you said, you could just fish off the side.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
I think I
funny,
could have done it with the radar. The problem is the radar just doesn't have much room. Where I think with
right?
the PA-14, I can for sure use a flogger.
Oh, probably, yeah. I'm actually looking at. I need to get a new kayak this year. Well, probably next year, but I actually have a bass boat that I'm gonna sell because I actually like fishing from the kayak more than I do the bass boat.
Hmm.
It's just when it comes down to it, it's more versatile. I can bring it to small bodies of water, but I can also fish big bodies of water. And then if I get a bigger kayak, I can then put the motor and the battery. And the Old Town isn't really designed to put a motor on. Like, there's
Hmm.
not a good way to do it. I did it actually with I used the power pole mount on the back, and we made like a little transom off of that. And unfortunately, it's like too heavy because it's on one side,
Mm.
and I was kind of listing that side the whole time, even with trying to balance the weight, so I couldn't do it. But now you have the motor on your kayak. Is that a Torpedo or is that
Yeah,
a okay?
yeah. It's a 403 AC.
Okay,
Yep.
that's because that's I think that's the route I'm gonna go. I don't necessarily care about like spot lock and all that. It's just about like I want to go over there and I want to be able to just power down and get over there because the tournament that I'm in allows motors,
Hmm.
so it's going to be kind of a nice deal.
Yeah, I've seen, man. So one of my new friends that I've been and talking with, and I've been following him for a while. And if you're in the kayak scene, you haven't heard his name yet, I really encourage you to go and look up his YouTube channel. And it's Damien Tao, and he's out in California. And his setup for being super efficient. And while I'm almost like part of me is struggling morally with with doing this, but he has a torpedo in the back and a bow mount on the front, and Damien fishes very similar to how
Wow.
I like to fish, where I love the torpedo for graphing, but I really want spot lock because there's a lot of times where
Yeah.
it's I'm losing fish because I'm too focused on keeping my steering in place for boat positioning that I either miss bites or I lose fish because I'm too late to get set the hook on them type of deal. And whereas with that, I mean, it's legal. It's legal to use it in the tournaments that allow motors. So it's like, man, I'm kind
That's
of
a lot
teeter,
of
but also weight. Weight is the biggest
that's a
thing.
lot
Like,
of
because
weight. Yeah.
yeah, I fish Lake Erie out of the kayak a lot. I'm not
Right.
afraid to go out there when there's 2 3 footers, and that's a lot of weight to have on the front. If we're gonna be doing that, of course, I probably wouldn't use it if that were the case, but it's
Yeah. Now,
something I'm
would you
teetering
run
with.
that? Does he run that off one big battery, or does he split the batteries up too? Like, because I mean, you're gonna have draw on both of those at that point.
So Torpedo have they use their own battery. They don't allow
Okay.
you to have it run off of something different, and it's literally like a small little little box. It's really small.
Okay.
I should say really small, but it's like a small lunchbox if that makes any sense from a size
Is it like
standpoint.
a
Whereas
lithium battery? Is that what they have in there, or is it like some
I
sort of
think
proprietary thing
it's
that they have?
I think it's lithium ion. I don't think it's
Okay.
completely lithium because the size of it for sure, it's got to be lithium ion. I think I could be completely wrong here, but I know it's not entirely lithium because, like, once you hit about 30%, this motor doesn't top out at top speed anymore. So it's you
Gotcha.
can tell it's definitely not lithium in that sense because lithium
Right.
would stay full draw.
Right.
Um, but I mean, I would imagine he probably has like 100 amp or something like that that he's got for the bow mount when he runs
Yeah,
that.
because I'm assuming his bow mount's what, like an XI3 or something that he's
Yeah.
running there.
Yep.
Yeah. See, that's kind of my goal. That's actually my intended use is like I want to get a bigger, like a 13-foot kayak or 14 or whatever, something in that range where I could put like my goal would be if I could do it would be to buy the kayak outright, sell my old town, and then basically try to sell my old town for the cost of the XI3 and battery,
Mm.
and then I can kind of run that way because like you said, spot lock would be nice for sure. Like that's the one thing about kayak fishing. I think actually I have a bass boat and a kayak, and I feel like boat positioning with a kayak is almost more important because you have to be able to cast, and the wind affects you a lot more. Like you can turn yourself, but as soon as that wind picks up or whatever, you're going wherever. It doesn't matter how good a
Yeah.
kayak you have.
Yeah, and then, like, to put that in a more perspective, like, if your bass boat is drifting off a spot, you can still alter your body to get
Right.
a good hook set, like, say if you get bit. Whereas if a kayak, if you're sitting down, I mean,
Yeah, you're screwed.
you're gonna lose fish if you're not positioned correctly. And of course, you can stand and turn around, but that's not always the case. It's not always that easy. So
No, and that's the other thing is that a lot of people ask me, like, I actually don't stand much in my kayak again because I'm a little bit bigger and I'm running a 10.5 foot kayak, so the stability isn't exactly where I want it to be. It's not as wide as like a Hobie, but um, turning around in a kayak is not that like people think that that's you could do a dance up there. That's not necessarily the case. If you're in wave and wind, it's not as easy as you might think to get up and down without gravity's trying to pull you back down. So
we're not all Christine Fisher that we can dance around the
yeah,
front of them.
you
She's
know
a
what's funny?
ninja.
I was just watching a short though when like she fell out of her kayak. Like there was literally I think it was like a short or I don't know if it was a full video that I was just seeing part of like her torpedo. She was running her torpedo and like fell out
Oh yeah,
and
see,
she didn't have her
kill
like kill
switch.
switch on.
Yeah, that was the biggest thing. Is that's entirely why she fell out was because of that.
Yep.
Which she called out too. It wasn't like she was trying to like hide it or anything. She
Oh
was like,
no,
yeah, she was
that
like,
was
I'm
literally the
done. Yeah.
title of the video. Like it was like this is why you attach your kill switch, and I was like,
Hmm.
yeah, that because that's the one thing that people don't think about is like that
I've
you
been
could be in
I've been
trouble.
super tempted to do it, man. There's times where I'm sitting there thinking about because like Santee Cooper, I was sitting there using my paddle and I was standing on my seat and I was using it as like a paddle board to look for spawners and
Yep.
I'd see them, mark them, keep going type of deal. And there was times where I just wasn't catching or traveling as much or traveling as far as I think I could have. Whereas if I had the Torpedo, I was thinking about just putting my kill switch down there and just use like standing bending down to adjust my handle for the steering
Right.
and just like go farther and faster. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, I want to do it standing, but I
Yeah.
don't want to make that one mistake that sends me in the lake and you know, sends my
Absolutely.
kayak screaming away from me and I'm
Screaming
screwed.
around. Yeah, exactly.
And Santee Cooper when it was mating season with gators, so that's probably not the
Yeah,
most ideal
exactly.
situation.
Yeah, you don't want to be in the water for that. But it's
No.
funny because a lot of times for me, because I don't have the motor, I'm not as concerned about that. It's not even like I should be more concerned about ending up in the water, but personally, I'm honestly more concerned about what am I gonna lose?
Mm,
Like what baits
same.
are
I
gonna
don't
end
care
up
if
on
I
the
go in.
lake?
I don't
Yeah,
care if
like
I go in. Just save my stuff.
yeah, like am I gonna lose a fish finder? Is it gonna get shorted out because I buried it in the water? Am I gonna dump all my rods in the bottom of the lake and then be
you know,
screwed? Like that's actually more my concern with standing up than actually falling in the water myself. Because I have a life jacket on and I know how to get back in my kayak if I have to. Like it's just how much money am I gonna lose if I dump this thing?
Yeah, and you know what too? Like I know some people are like, yeah, I put flotation devices on my kayak, or there's like the saver butt ends you can replace your butt end of your rods with that like help it flow to the top. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, yeah, but I'm not willing to sacrifice one, how that rod performs, how that rod feels, and the weight of
Right.
it too. Uh, and quite honestly, I can't put those damn foam things on the rod that I've seen some people do. I can't do that. I don't know.
No.
I'm sure it doesn't get in the way, or maybe it does. I don't know. I've never used it, but I just look at it and I'm like, I just visually am petty and I can't do that.
I mean, you get the old school guys that are pool noodle with zip ties. Like I know a lot of guys that did that for a while. They would put that on
Yeah,
there.
I still see that. And I mean, it's like kudos to them too, because like if you lose a rod, it's gonna float. But
Right.
I'm not knocking it. I'm just more like saying I'm a loser and
Yeah.
I can't do it.
Yeah, no, it's like I said, in my mind, it's gonna cause some sort of problem too. Like I know like there's gonna be something about the way the rod performs that's gonna be different, or I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah.
I constantly am tinkering with stuff too. Like that's the other thing is like my rods. I change stuff out all the time. Like I don't have a lot of I don't have 16 or 17 rods necessarily, but I'll change reels out. Sometimes I'll swap reels to different rods because I don't like the way that's performing. Like I buy a
Mhm.
lot of times. I have like almost. I was doing the math the other day, so I have 13 Abu Garcia favorite Daiwa. Like I have almost every brand because I buy what's on sale basically. So like a lot of times I have so many different things, and then I've started like being smart about like specializing on like I need a medium heavy moderate or a medium heavy fast or whatever for whatever technique. But then a lot of times I don't like when I'm in the heat of a tournament. I just put whatever I grab and I cut it off and then I throw stuff on. And
Yeah.
that's I think the thing I got to learn more about is like making sure I use the right style of rod for the bait. Because I mean, for the most part, most of mine I do tend to lean towards moderate action rods as a general rule, so I kind of get away with
Yeah, more
a
parabolic.
lot of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
because then honestly, a lot of times if I'm using a treble bait, I get away with it.
Moderate for sure. Yep. Makes
So
sense. Yeah,
because
it's that's exactly what I do, man. I have some rods that are kind of like general that you can workhorse them, kind of
yep,
be very universal, like your 7 foot medium heavies type of deal.
yep,
But man, I am so deep down the rabbit hole of like I specifically have a 6'6" medium heavy moderate fast that's only for poppers that
yep,
are up shallow, or I have rods that are only for spinner baits that are deep and spinner baits that are shallow, and then I have rods. I have two different style chatterbait. Well, I have four chatterbait rods, but two of them are uh, graphite, and two of them are your composite for when I'm like fishing grass and open water, and then the
yep.
other two are for when you're around like timber and like close quarters type of deal. If you're not ready to like back that up financially in the amount of inventory you have
Yep.
and send your head spinning at the same time, it's because once you
That's
start thinking about it, they're like for every technique type of deal. If you
yeah,
want the best setup, you're gonna need as many rods as many techniques as
yep.
you're trying to fish.
That's the thing that I think it's funny because I find that everybody that I talk to and the more people I talk to in general in the industry across everything, you almost have to have a little bit of ADD
Oh
to be
yeah,
a fisherman
OCD as well.
because the OCD too. Like you go from I'm gonna buy an ugly stick with a GX2 spinning reel and I'm gonna go to the bank and catch bluegill, and then you start targeting a specific species of fish. If you're a bass fisherman, you go from it's a 0 to 100 usually start. Usually you go from I caught my first bass in a kayak on a Senko. Now I need crankbaits. Now I need chatterbaits. Now I need jerkbaits, and then you
Mhm.
like buy everything. And then unfortunately, the pitfall I think everybody falls into is not only do they buy everything, they buy every color that they have too. And then you get to a point where you're like, yeah, I only really need perch colors and a couple of odd colors. And then you start to like specialize on rods because I know like that's the rabbit hole that I can't financially support, but if I had a rod sponsor or I had a side hustle or something that I could make some extra money, I can tell you that the amount of rods I have would triple in no time because like you said there is something about when you find a rod. Like I bought a 13 to 5 black. It's a 6'7", but it's a medium heavy,
Mhm.
but it's so sensitive that I use it for small swim baits because of the size.
Mm.
And it's not even really like that is spec wise should not be used for that at all, really, because I'm throwing Kitex on this thing.
Mhm.
But I throw it with a 7-speed Daiwa reel, and I just throw lighter line on it. And the thing about that setup is I can basically use that same setup if I want to throw a wacky rig. I can just cut that off and throw like a finesse bait on it because it is so short. I can skip with it in a kayak. Because that's the other thing people don't think about is skipping in a kayak or using like a jerk bait technique in a kayak is entirely different than using those techniques on a boat because you can't
Mhm.
point your rod tip down. Your rod tip's hitting the water at that point if you don't have a longer rod. So
Yeah.
How do you
Yeah.
actually, when you work a jerk bait, do you like work it horizontal or do you just stand up and?
I same way as I'd rather stand, but I've figured out a setup that I liked because I mean, quite frankly, when I'm throwing a jerk bait, I'm using forward facing sonar when I'm using it.
Right.
Um, and I'm regardless if I'm standing or I'm sitting, I figure out a way where I'm slashing. You're always wanting to go at a 45-degree angle. It's what I
Yep.
learned from some of the best jerkbait fishermen in the world is 45 degrees, and you're
Yep.
snapping and you're letting that rod come back up. Because if you hold down, you snap down, you hold, that line will end up pushing that bait will jerk and it'll push a little bit forward. Whereas if
I
you when you
gotcha.
snap and you let your rod back come back up, it allows that bait to jerk and it allows that if it suspends or sinks
Oh yeah,
to
then it float. Yeah,
to
it
either
points
stay
down.
yeah to stay where it's pointing and
That
it's
makes sense actually. I never thought of it that way because that does make sense when you leave it down, it's going to leave that loop, which is going to basically make that bait kick back up instead of stay at that
yep.
angle. That
So
makes sense.
what I do is so like say I'm sitting in my kayak right now. I'm here. I use
Okay.
it's all about the right rod too. Like I throw
Right.
a 610 medium moderate is what I
Okay.
throw on mine, and it's just simple. You're just knocking slack. It's not like you have to like really rip it hard.
You're not KVD ripping it.
No, and honestly, I don't. I mean, there's times, dude, where I'll give it like if they felt hard pops, like because
Right.
if you're watching it on forward facing sonar, you're seeing how that fish is reacting.
Right.
Like there's times where it's rip rip, and they'll follow it, and they won't eat it when you're doing that. You'll give it like a one twitch, they won't eat it. You give them a little two tap up, like vertically. You can go pop pop, and that bait goes from doing this to this to going up up,
Yeah.
and then what it does is allows that bait to almost kind of spin on them, and you can kind of almost do a little weird line trick
Oh,
with it.
yeah.
But that's a different style cadence of what they've been following, and sometimes it allows them to smack that.
Yep.
But one thing I learned from Hank Cherry was you can do your different style cadences, whether it's down to the side, up to let that bait do something different. But what do you do? Or you rip down, rip, and then you have that line slack. And say like on forward, you see a fish is looking at it, and it's like it's just nosing on it. You just do a little bit of lift in your line slack, and say that jerkbait rips and is sitting like this. It allows that jerkbait to go like that, and says, "Hello, fish," eats it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's sneaky. That's funny. I never
Jerkbait,
thought of it
dude,
that way.
jerkbait, I feel in my I'm adamant about this is the hardest technique to get really good at.
Yeah.
It takes
Well, and I think a lot of it
lot
too,
of
if you don't
experience.
have forward facing sonar, you don't really know what that bait looks like.
No.
That's one of the biggest problem. When you're bombing that thing out there, because really that's the thing about jerk baits too, is you really got to get it out there because you're reeling it down and then it's down there, but now you have no idea unless you're fishing like maybe Michigan or something like that where you can see 20 feet, you're not going to have visibility to see that bait. But
One thing I've learned, man, that I've taken to the bank now, and it's been a big learning lesson. And there's been a few guys that talked about it. Ben Milliken's been a great proponent of talking about this. Is how much fish can actually see. Like he's shown it with glide baits, jerk baits before. He's fishing in like 15 foot of water. As soon as they hit the surface, and it's like a foot of viz, fish are already rising up to it. You got to think about it. It's way different for us when we're looking down at a dark bottom and we see there's no way you can see into that. When say it's sunny, right, and it looks just muddy as heck, those fish are looking up. They're still seeing a sun glare. It's way easier to see that
oh,
halo
okay.
silhouette. I mean, for as humans, right? But like as
Right.
fish, it's their element. So you got to think it's a little bit different in that. Don't ever count those fish off. Like I mean, dude, I watched Brad Case. He's a dude that's a hammer in the kayak space. It was the first Bass Kayak Championship. I watched him absolutely steamroll fish. PK went from a 10-foot viz fishery to maybe 2 inches overnight. Like it was orange. It was basically chocolate milk. And I thinking there's no way they're going to see my baits anymore. Ditched my ledge schools that I found. Went flipping up shallow, and he was about 10 yards off of me, and he was throwing a translucent silent square bill in 2 inches of visibility and was catching freak giants. He got third overall, had like 30 pounds the one day,
Fair enough.
and I watched him catch like a 9-pounder doing that. Like it was just ridiculous.
And
And
actually, yeah, that's true. Because I mean, honestly, too. Also, bass don't just rely on their eyes; they use their lateral line, so
yep,
they don't have to necessarily physically see it;
exactly,
they can feel it.
exactly.
So that's I see, and that's funny because I never really think about that because there's not. I mean, same thing with like where you are. Than like the Great Lakes are pretty clear, but like a lot of the like ponds in New York, a lot of the fishing around here, even Champlain, like Champlain's not a clear lake. Like if you've ever fished Champlain, the visibility is not that great in Champlain unless you're fishing way up north. Um, I've never thought about the fact that like I always try to base my bait selection on specifically on watercolor, but I guess in a way, if you're doing the right technique or making the
Contrast, my
active
yeah,
contrast is big, yeah.
contrast and forage. That's the biggest thing,
Yep.
in my personal opinion.
That's
It's the
actually
biggest
one of the
thing.
things I do. One thing I do with color, which is kind of weird, is like I make my own again, do it mold steel, but I actually took something I just thought of for the hell of it is one of my favorite like colors is June bug worm.
Hmm.
I actually laminate it with black and blue fleck, so it has both colors in it
Yeah,
because it's got just enough contrast where if you have darker water, you get like a darker side in the purple, and it kind of like creates a slightly different contrast, and I actually feel like it upsizes my bite. Since I've done it, I've caught in a lot. Like I don't catch as many fish with it, but I do catch. I feel like bigger fish, and I think it's one of those like they haven't seen that combination of colors together because no one makes, not that I'm aware of, no bait maker makes that kind of a laminate. So,
right.
and that's what's cool about Do It is I can make that stuff in my
Yeah,
mudroom. So,
if you can imagine it, you can make it.
which is awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're getting on an hour here, so I'm probably gonna call it right now. But I want to thank you for coming on and talking. Like I said, I wanted to just get on here and introduce some of my people that watch my channel to you. If you guys haven't checked out Serious Angler Podcast, if you haven't checked out Be the Fish, the links are down in my description. Definitely check Baily out. A lot of what I know comes from guys like Baily and Alex Rudd and Mikey Balls and the other guys that I've had on the show. So if you want to learn more about it, you don't have to just watch me. There's a lot of other guys, and this guy gets to talk to pros a lot, so he knows quite a bit and he gets to learn a lot. So he gets a little bit of inside information and definitely learns from some of the best in the industry. So, but I want to thank you guys for coming along with me. I'm gonna cut it out here unless you got something else you want to throw in.
No, man, I just appreciate the invite. I hope we can do it again.
Absolutely. Also, guys, did your chasing hardware episode that hit today, right?
Yeah, it dropped a little while ago. It's a long one. I'll forewarn people. It's an hour long because I filmed the travel down to Tennessee,
Nice.
travel to the classic, and then setting up camp and everything at Santee. So there's practice. I was thinking about splitting it up, doing a travel video, then practice video, but I don't think people really care to see me go travel and talk in a truck and set up a tent. So
You'd be
you got,
surprised, but yeah.
yeah,
But anyways, my point is, guys, if you like tournament style videos, I have a tournament series coming up. I will admit I'm stealing some ideas from Baily. I've got
take it.
some process that I want to do. I like the fact that he doesn't just go, "Hey guys, I'm fishing a tournament and let's go fish." He's like, "Hey guys, I'm in my truck getting gas. I'm thinking about what I'm going to use for baits. I'm not sure what my technique's going to be. I'm checking into the Airbnb." Like he actually gives you the full experience from leaving his front door to checking into the hotel to practice, and he gives you that full tournament world experience instead of just showing you the day of fishing, which I'm trying to do a little bit of because I like that style, that vloggy kind of content. So I will admit, and I'll say it to him right now, that I'm kind of stealing the idea a little
Hey,
bit because I think it's a cool way to tell a story rather than just show a fishing video. It's an actual story, and I think that's kind of a neat idea. So if you guys like that kind of stuff, check out the Chasing Hardware series because I watch every episode. So if that tells you anything, and I watch a lot of YouTube, so I flock to that stuff. But yeah, I'm gonna end it right here, guys. So I want to thank you all for hanging out with me for an hour, and we will see you next.